I'd like to talk to you guys today about what discipline is and how to be disciplined. Now, first, we'll start with the what. Now, I think discipline is misunderstood in this day and age. Discipline, in my opinion, is different from person to person. If it is easy for you to do, then it is not an act of discipline. It is just a habit. Once upon a time, I needed to be disciplined to go to the gym. Now in this day and age, or day and age, now at this point in my life, it takes more discipline for me to not go to the gym. So I don't think me going to the gym is me being disciplined. I could show real discipline in, taking rest days when I truly need them. That is where the discipline is, in that activity. So they change over time. What once took discipline to do now takes discipline not to do. So you can't just look at someone's day to day life and ask, is that discipline? And someone who's been going to the gym for, just as long as me may not like going to the gym. And they truly need to activate discipline day in and day out. But for me, that is not the case. So it's really from person to person on what is discipline. Because if you get to a point where it's just what you truly want to do, it's not discipline, at least always. If there becomes a day, not every single day I want to go to the gym, but more times than not I do. And a way to stay disciplined is to or a way to be disciplined, I believe. And this is a amazing insight that I think if you can just bring to your attention, it can make discipline so much easier. Is to think about how you will feel after. With any activity that takes discipline for you, presumably after the act, you want to do it for some reason. So after the act of getting through what you don't want, there is satisfaction, there is fulfillment. And this outweighs instant gratification and pleasure, tenfold. This is true enjoyment. Pleasure is fleeting, pleasure is shameful, pleasure is not something you can take deep pride and satisfaction in, but fulfillment is. And in sticking with a thing that you said you were going to do, with being disciplined, this is the byproduct of doing things that you don't want to do, that you should do. Now, for me, I think for a long time, discipline, I was very undisciplined. And at a point in my life, everything took a 180. And discipline just became a thing that I did. And almost in the occurrence with that 180, discipline just didn't become discipline anymore because I wanted it so badly. And now, now that it's been something that's been a part of me for so long, I occasionally find myself in certain things, not wanting to do them. And I forgot, that I need to use discipline because for so long it almost felt like what I wanted to do was quote unquote the disciplined thing to do. And that just stemmed from a life that was, completely a 180 from discipline. So I made the 180 switch, and what I wanted to do was the most disciplined thing that I could do. But now that has changed, and it's not always that way. And I'm realizing now that I need to call upon that discipline once again, that I know that I have and that I know I can call upon. But I got into the habit of thinking that what I wanted was discipline. And it is, but I've been doing it for so long, and I'm just saying this to bring to your attention how you can start sliding off from discipline, because it can become something that you want to do, and it can turn into something that, for your well-being, you should keep doing. But you kind of, you think you can kind of think about it in the sense of the gym. When you first start going to the gym, for the first year or two, you get newbie gains, and newbie gains are amazing. Every time you go to the gym, you're stronger. You get new veins. You get more muscle. It's like each and every time you look different. The pump's bigger, the pump's better, and it's just like, a state of like working out bliss for 2 years. And then it gets to the point where the gains start slowing down, and it's not as it's not as fun anymore, and you're actually weaker than you were a month ago, even though you've been doing everything right. And it's just, it's not like it was when it first started. And that's when you need to start having the discipline. And that's where I see I need to keep, that's where I see personally in my own life where I need to realize that, oh yeah, I do need discipline in this. The newbie gains are over. It isn't every time I put in this work, I see, I see an outcome that is beneficial. Sometimes there's a lot of things going on underneath the surface right now that I can't see, but they're happening, and you just gotta trust the process and stick with it. There's that there's like a there's like a type of bamboo that grows under the ground, I think for 50 years or maybe 20 years, but it does most of its, in 20 years, I think, say 20 to 50 years, it grows like a couple feet out of the ground. But the roots it makes in the ground are, very deep and very strong. And then in a span of, a couple years, this thing sprouts up 50 feet because of its foundation. Its base can hold it. But if you looked at that bamboo, and you say this thing's been growing for 20 years, it's only, you know 2 feet tall. Like, what is wrong with this thing? But you didn't see all the work underneath. And then you go back to it a year later and it's 50 feet tall. And you say, yeah, this thing's an overnight success. What happened? How is this possible? And it's because behind the scenes, underground, this bamboo was putting in work for, 20 to 50 years. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly. But that's how discipline is. You get to a point, you get newbie gains, it's easy. And then you get to a point and you can't see the gains anymore. But you just got to trust the gains are there. And sometimes, you'll fall off the wagon and you'll realize why you were disciplined, because it sucks to fall off the wagon. It sucks to, discipline is true discipline. Jocko says discipline is freedom, and it truly is. You feel so much better being a disciplined person. I know I do, and I think everyone does, if they can just be disciplined and realize that the long-term satisfaction, the long-term fulfillment, the long-term pride that you get from being a person of discipline outweighs any instant gratification, any pleasure, because pleasure is fleeting and you're left with the dishonor. And discipline, it can be uncomfortable, but you're left with long-term satisfaction and fulfillment. And when you look in the mirror, there's no mistaking the type of person that you are. You're a person who does things they don't want to do because they know that they are beneficial to them. And they can get through the short-term discomfort, and they can get through hard times. And they don't need motivation. They don't need inspiration. They just need the reminder that this is going to feel, or this is what I should do. And like the reminder I like to give myself, and I think it helps so much, is just to think about how you'll feel after. To think about, because I mean, at least with like going to the gym or working out, like I said, I don't need it often. But every once in a while, it's like, okay. every really in a blue moon, um, I'll be like, I'll feel better after. And then, yeah, you work out for an hour and you're done and you're like, yeah, I feel way better. Or going for a run, go run. You're like, oh, I don't really want to run. You go run for an hour, you're in like a euphoric runner's high and you're like, so glad I ran. And then if you don't do these things, you're like, oh, why didn't I just do it? I just spent an hour, sitting around, putzing around. I could have been done my run. I could have been done the gym. I could have been done this. I could have been done that. But instead, I didn't want to do it. So I did what I wanted to do, which was just trivial, meaningless, not beneficial to me in any way whatsoever. The only thing it benefited was degrading my soul and making me a worse human being. There's so much of that in this day and age. There's so much of that. And a lot of it is on social media. Now, for me, personally, I got rid of social media like 2 years ago. And I don't count YouTube as social media because all I use YouTube for really, ever since they added shorts, I've needed some willpower to stay away from shorts. Yeah, YouTube, you should get away from shorts if you're watching this. um, but I watch long form content, and to me that isn't social media. Long form content is, it's like I'm watching like Jordan Peterson lectures and like Andrew Huberman podcast and Chris Williamson's podcast and you know informational content. To me, that isn't social media. And for me, as I said in the beginning, a couple of years ago, I realized it didn't take a lot of discipline to get rid of social media because I could feel how much it was impacting my life in a negative way. But now, at times, I want to get social media back. I want to see, what's going on, if people have texted me, things of that nature. And now I have to recall on discipline and say, no, you don't feel good after you even spend 5 minutes on these apps. You don't feel good. 5 minutes reading a book like, Meditations is a way better use of your time, or any of these books behind me is a way better use of your time than 5 minutes on social media. And I won't say, and that's why I don't think YouTube is social media, because I've watched videos for 4 hours that have given me information that are timeless, that I'll never forget, that I'm truly deeply grateful for. But I've spent I spent a lot more than 4 hours on social media scrolling through things that I don't remember whatsoever. Mindless, trivial things that don't matter in the slightest, that didn't improve me as a human being, and honestly just made me worse. So now I need to call upon discipline. And I'm just giving you examples from my life. So maybe you can see insights for your life. But now I need to act upon discipline and say, I want to, fill in the blank. I want to, scroll on, TikTok for a little bit. I want to, I want to text some people. Texting isn't something I really do either because I think it's also a waste of time. I'd rather spend time with people in person than text them. So I don't text, but occasionally I'm like, oh, I want to text this person. And it's like, why? You must know yourself. And it's not good for me to do those things just with how my brain works. My brain is not good with it. So you got to know yourself, and I got to know, I want to do this, but it's not beneficial. It's not what I should do. And it takes discipline to not do it, because it's so easy to just say, it's just this one time, it's not that big of a deal. And then you start comparing yourself to other people and saying, oh my, like I don't even have these things on my phone. I haven't been on in a week. I haven't done this. I haven't had it for years. It's like comparison is the thief of joy. But that's not really, comparison is the thief of joy. But more importantly, comparison inhibits your potential. Comparison, you can be striving for the heights. You can be doing such a good job. And then you can compare yourself to someone down here. And that just gives you a reason to, slack off for a little bit. And, it's better to compare yourself to somebody, way up here where you're right here. Because, yeah, maybe you'll feel like crap about yourself sometimes, but you'll be striving up higher and higher. But if you compare yourself to someone down here, yeah, you'll feel good for a little bit, but then as you start dropping down to their level, because that's who you're comparing yourself to, you're going to feel like crap. And you're going to wish you never did. And you're going to realize you compared yourself to somebody who was so much, I don't want to say worse, but you compared yourself to somebody that if you had their life, you would be depressed. That's not a good person to compare yourself to. And everyone has different goals. Everyone has different things that they want out of this life. So to compare yourself to somebody else who literally wants something else out of this life that you are living, both living, it's stupid. It's stupid. So you need to realize, you can't always just do what you want. And if you're a person like me who for so long, what you wanted was from the outside looking in, was like the most disciplined thing. Like what I wanted to do was literally delete all my social media, read for hours a day, work 60 hours a week, write for hours a day, go for long walks, go for 16-mile hikes on 10,000-foot mountains in Southern California. That was my life for a while. And I mean, I don't know what it sounds like to you, but it may sound like discipline, but it wasn't. It was just what I wanted to do. But now what I want to do isn't always that. And discipline is becoming discipline is becoming a big thing in my life. because because what I wanted to do for so long was, I believed, the best thing to do. But now what I want to do is not always the best, and it's corrupting, and it leaves a bad taste in my mouth, and it's turning me into a person that I don't want to be. So now I must call upon the discipline that I know I have. And I think a lot of this was due to, a taking a shot at moderation. I thought maybe I can just get these apps back that I like, or that I used to like, and just, every couple days go on there. Maybe I can just do this and it'll be okay. But as Cicero said, you know, absence is easier than moderation. And that is so very true. Absence of social media, absence of these temptations, absence of bad role models is so much easier than, moderation. It's way easier to just deprive yourself of the ice cream than to say, a one bite, or deprive yourself of chips than to say, oh, one chip, or whatever, fill in the blank. Moderation is truly harder than absence. And moderation is more virtuous than absence, but it's harder too. So if you're not at the point in life where you're so disciplined, because moderation is the true discipline. And I'm not at the point where I can practice moderation that well on a lot of things. I'm a person who obsesses, and I'm a person who, if I do it a little bit, I want to do it, I want to go all out. And that's with anything trivial or, super meaningful. So I need to be, self-aware in that aspect. And if you're like that too, you need to be self-aware in that aspect and realize that it always turns into more than you think it will. And absence is easier than moderation, but absence is way better, I believe, than overindulgence. even though they're, um, they're like on opposite sides of the bell curve or whatever you want to say of like the U or the horseshoe, they're on the opposite sides. Absence is better than overindulgence. So just be self aware and realize what discipline actually is. Just because everyone calls you disciplined, if you're doing what you want, that is not discipline. Some people just have different wants and different desires. And if your want and desire is to, you know, run every day, go to the gym every day, read every day, write every day, work, 60-hour work weeks, then you're not disciplined. You're just doing what you want. But if you know you should start, say, taking cold showers, but you don't, you want to, or no, you don't want to, but you know you should, then you are not disciplined. It's as simple as that. It's doing the things you don't want to do, but you know that you should do. Discipline can only be found there. You know, Ryan Holiday in Discipline is Destiny. That's probably a book right there. Discipline is Destiny. And he talks about Lou Gehrig, I'm pretty sure, a baseball player. Is it Lou Gehrig? I think it is. But he talks about how, he walked around New York in winter, in shorts and a t-shirt, and, you know, how disciplined he was for this. Now, Lou Gehrig was a disciplined person, I think. But I don't think he was disciplined in that action. I live in Maine, and I used to walk around in shorts and a t-shirt in Maine winters. And that was because I wanted to. Like, there was, I still do when it's cold. I like being cold. And, like, there's no discipline in that. Someone who hates being cold may look at you and say, discipline. But you look at them all bundled up, sweating, and 20-degree weather, and you say, discipline. It's different from everybody, is the point I'm trying to make. And to realize what discipline means to you is very important, because you may think that you are disciplined because of what society looks like. People who are gluttonous and lazy. But if it's what you want to do, you're no different than the person who's just doing what they want to do, but is just eating a lot and, you know, not doing a lot. So, yeah, just realize is what discipline actually is, and realize, there's probably, you may think you're disciplined, but there's probably things in your life that you should do, but you don't want to do, so you don't do them. And that it means you are not disciplined. I think I've beaten the dead horse on that, but I really want to stress that, because I don't think society or people agree with that or understand that. You know, someone like Jocko Willing talks a lot about discipline, but Jocko himself talks about how much he loves this stuff. Yes, as I said, like there's days where you don't want to do it, but those days are few and far in between, and it'd take more discipline for Jocko to stop doing these things, due to an injury or something like that, than it does for him to just get up and get after it. And that can be the same person for someone who works 100 hours a week. You might look like that's discipline, but really, they just can't not be doing something for 10 minutes, or their brain starts, just beating them up and thinking they're being lazy and this, that, and the other, even though they need like a day off. So just don't be too quick to judge what discipline is in other people or in yourself. And just because this video turned into me venting, and I'm sorry for that if you're still here, but I'll end it with this. I forgot. Yeah, I probably said what I was about to say like 4 times, anyways. Yeah, just ask yourself and be honest. Are you disciplined or are you just doing what you want?